This is the last lecture of this series. This is the last lecture on basic obedience and remediation of dogs, of problem behaviors. Um, I'm so thankful for you having watched literally any of these, but if you've watched all of them, huge shout out to you. Please let me know what you think. And let's dive in to group classes specifically. So part of the intention of this online series is to give you some foundational knowledge and help you feel like you might be able to do some free dog training classes or at least low-cost dog training classes in your community, because we really do need more of this. The animal shelter in your area, the animal rescues, the animal welfare organizations in your area really need community support right now. They really need dog trainers, skilled dog trainers, keeping dogs out of shelters, or at least just encouraging that bond between people and dogs. So let's talk about what those group classes look like. I'm actually going to share some scripts from the dog training classes that I ran years ago that we have used for students to base their own dog training classes on. So I'll share those at the end here, and they'll also be linked in the description of this video. But let's go through basics here. Safety is first and foremost, and safety is never an accident. Love this idea. My friend yelled it at me one time when I was doing something a little unsafe. She said, safety is never an accident. I think she was quoting something there. Anyway, we want behavior histories, vaccines, and equipment to all be part of this conversation about safety. The vaccines the dog has on board is about keeping that dog safe. It's about keeping other dogs in that class safe. We don't want to be spreading parvo, distemper, adenovirus, parainfluenza, those basic ones that we vaccinate for. Definitely not rabies. We don't want a resurgence of rabies in the dog population, our pet dog population. Depending on your area, there are certain diseases that are more common than others. We don't have a ton of parvo here in Sonoma County. However, we do have parvo out in the Bay Area and like the larger Bay Area. Just up north, we have higher instances of heartworm. So it's more important to be looking at asking everybody about heartworm prevention. Again, I'm not going to diagnose anything, nor am I going to make any veterinary recommendations. I'm not going to tell people that they need to go get their animal vaccinated. That is between them and their veterinarian. But what I can recommend is that they go to their veterinarian and talk to them about those vaccines. What I can do is require basic vaccines, basic puppyhood vaccines, DAPP, which is distemper, adenovirus, parvovirus, and parainfluenza, or DHLP, which includes lepto. What I can do is require those because I want all of the animals that show up to my class, all the dogs that show up to my class, to have these basic vaccines on board so that my dogs, the dogs that are coming to my classes, are ideally not spreading parvo and distemper, which absolutely can kill a dog. And we do have those showing up in shelters because of a decreased rate of vaccination. We have those dogs showing up in shelters a lot more. So I also want to ask about behavior history. If this dog poses a safety risk to other animals or other dogs in this class, I need to know about it. There might be management solutions that we can use. We might have some physical barriers. So like some pop-up barriers that I might be able to put around the dog so they can't visually see somebody. But if this is a situation where if this dog gets off leash, it's going to hurt somebody or something or someone or some dog, I want to be mindful this might not be an appropriate space for this dog. We can do one-on-one counseling in a more secure area that is less risk to the people around, but I want to be fair to everybody in this class. And being fair to everybody in this class means that if there is a dog that needs to be excluded for some reason, we exclude that dog for some reason. Same thing goes for equipment. We talked a little bit about equipment in the earlier presentation, specifically about equipment. The most important thing for group classes, my group classes at least, personal bias, my group classes, one of the most important things is that the equipment is secure. Whatever equipment you're using, I want it to be secure. A lot of the smaller pieces of equipment, like a head collar, like the Halti, I've had a lot of Haltis fail. I've had a lot of flat collars fail. Not all flat collars are made equal. The plastic buckle ones especially, I've had a lot of those fail, especially with a harder pulling dog. However, if I have a smaller dog and I've got a reasonably secure looking flat collar, it might be appropriate. Again, it's got to be case by case. Might be more secure to have a harness on one dog, but I've had dogs slip out of harnesses as well. It needs to be a well-fitting piece of equipment. My recommendation is to have some sort of inventory of harnesses, like ask for donations of harnesses and collars and stuff from people that around you, like within your network, your dog loving network. Ask for those donations so that you have some on hand to be able to swap people out. Like, hey, that harness looks like it doesn't quite fit. I've got one here that might. Can we swap you out for that? Set them up with that better fitting harness. You've got a little rotating inventory that you're not paying for. But I want secure equipment that that dog cannot escape from. I do not want dogs running around off leash in my group training classes. I don't want them bolting over to the street or just off loose somewhere. I don't want animal control to have to come to my classes for any reason, unless they're there to have some fun. So again, I've talked about this. A lot of this is rehashing previous ones, so apologies, but I do want to be really, really specific here. We want to consider our personal strengths and weaknesses. That can be physical. If I'm physically not strong enough to handle really large dogs, I might say, hey, just to let you know, you look like you've got a great handle on that dog. I'm going to let you know that I'm not going to be able to back you up very much on this dog. Physically, I can't, right? Or likewise, kind of the opposite conversation there. I've had conversations with people in group classes where I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be able to come up and do anything hands-on with you and your dog because your dog's obviously scared of me. I'm a tall guy with a beard wearing a hat today, like a monster. Apologies to your dog. I'm going to do my best to be as least threatening as possible, but I'm not going to be able to do anything hands-on with you for this session. I can't wait to meet your dog in a couple sessions here. So consider your personal strengths and weaknesses. If you don't like puppies, don't do puppy classes. If you don't like working with reactivity, don't do leash reactivity group classes. If you don't like working with leash walking, you think that it's really tedious and frustrating or whatever, look out in the world for various methods of teaching leash walking. It doesn't have to be as hard as you think it is. But B, focus on something that does get you excited, something that you do have a passion for, right? If you get really excited about training sit down stay kind of stuff, which honestly, I really enjoy teaching sit down stay kind of stuff, go for it. If you get really excited about working with fearful dogs, you've got that kind of calming presence about you, and you've had people tell you, like, oh my gosh, my dog really likes you and it doesn't like anybody. Great, lead some fearful dog classes, some confidence building classes. But remember, above all else, when we're looking at planning our classes, regardless of what those strengths and weaknesses are, unless one of your strengths is like, I can set up a safe environment to do a group leash reactivity class or confidence building class or whatever it is, we want to keep the safety of the humans and animals in class at the top, kind of forefront of what we're doing. Here's that unconditional positive regard again. That person showed up to your classes ready to learn. They showed up. They took time out of their schedule to come meet you at that park or meet you at your facility or meet you wherever. And they decided that they were going to take this time to work with their dog. I am so unbelievably happy that you're here. And I'm so excited to work with you. That's the attitude we got to go into it with. Your job is to help people and their dogs. Your job is not to be the gatekeeper of like, I decide who is good enough to own a dog in my community. This is a rampant idea in animal sheltering and rescue, and it is so obnoxious and it needs to stop. You are not the one that gets to decide who gets to have a dog and who doesn't. Dogs are out there in the world. Everybody's got a lot of people have pets, like 60% of people have pets. It is not up to me to decide. What I can do is show up and be present for those people and help where I can. So again, assume positive intent. Mentioned this in the last lecture. Use client-friendly terminology. And when I'm giving feedback, especially, I see this a lot in especially novice dog trainers, but it gets worse and worse and worse if we don't address it as a novice dog trainer. It gets really, really bad if you're an experienced dog trainer. When I'm giving feedback to somebody, I want to be encouraging. I don't want to shout somebody out as being the worst in the class whenever possible. There's some situations where I can turn it into a little bit of a joke. Like if we're doing a game and somebody came in last place and it's because they've got this like senior dog that's kind of waddling up like, oh, great job. Slowest, but most fun, had the most fun doing it. Right. We can be friendly about that kind of like a successful loss or something. But when I'm giving feedback to somebody, I want to meet them where they're at in that moment, recognize that the way that they're doing it right now is how they were previously taught to do it by somebody that they respected. They saw it online somewhere from somebody that they trusted. I'm going to walk into it with like, hey, you seem to be doing that. You seem to be having a hard time with it. Do you want some feedback on that? It could just be like, no, I got this. It just takes me a minute, or like, I just need a second to kind of figure things out. And like, I appreciate you coming over, but like, we'll come back to it. Great. If we go through the entire class and the person never accepts any feedback, they might just be there to socialize their dog, just have their dog in the company of other people and other dogs, which is totally fair. It's a great place to do it in a structured sort of environment, as long as we're not disruptive to the rest of the class and as long as we're not taking anything away from anybody else's experience in the class. This is a great space to do it. Thank you so much for coming today. So when I'm giving feedback to people, I want to use client-friendly terminology. I want to talk to that person exactly where they are right now. Don't assume that the reason why they're doing anything is because they've got some sort of ill will towards the dog or because they're willfully ignorant of something that you know. This becomes it's this really insidious thing that happens in dog training is the more that you find out, the more that you learn about dog training behavior, the easier it is for you to forget what it was like when you didn't know anything about this. When you were brand new to dog training, you got your first dog or you're working with your first dog and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Because I've seen this person do it this way and that person do it that way and that person looked like they were successful doing that, but this person's saying to do this, but I'm seeing this information. Like, there's so much conflicting information available about dogs. Do not forget what it was like when you didn't know anything about dogs, because there was a point where you didn't know anything, even if it was when you were a kid. So meet that client exactly where they're at. Have that empathy for, like, you are doing your best. I wholeheartedly believe that every person that shows up to my group classes, they are doing their best. We want to set SMART goals in class, referenced this before, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. We want to balance individual attention with group goals. This, when we were talking about teaching a class, about teaching group classes, one of the other trainers in that conversation said, you know, a big focus has got to be, how do you manage the time monopolizers, the people that show up to a group class and they really want that one-on-one contact with you? That's fair, right? That person wants individualized feedback, and everybody to a certain extent deserves a little bit of individualized feedback. But I don't want my group classes just like treat everybody like a big lump. But we want to balance that with like the flow of class. So I really like, if possible, I really like to have an assistant with me. That assistant can sometimes go one-on-one with somebody that needs that one-on-one time during class. If I don't have that available, which is honestly not readily available, we need a little stronger culture around that. We need to build a little stronger culture on that. But if that person needs a one-on-one time, I'm going to recommend that they schedule a private consult with me. Or if you've got time after class, we can meet up after class. But be reasonable about what you're offering people. It's okay for you to say, hey, I don't have time today to meet one-on-one about this. We're going to do some group activities, and you're welcome to send me questions afterwards via email. And I might be able to get back to those, but I do offer private consults if we need some more one-on-one time. That's totally fair. That's why you offer that as a service. Or you can refer them out to other trainers. If I don't have time right now, or if my schedule doesn't work with your schedule, here's some other trainers in the area that you might be able to schedule some time with. I also want to look at the group in front of me. So if I've got a group of 5 people and I've got an hour with them, I can give everybody pretty individualized feedback and still keep like the group sort of activity flowing. Now, this takes a little bit of practice, but you'd be surprised at how quickly you can kind of pick up that skill. So balance our attention amongst our participants and be reasonable for this group. What's the group in front of you asking for? I've had plenty of classes where I go into it thinking that it's a leash walking class, and really everybody shows up and it's like, hey, we're going to do some foundational leash walking stuff, but it looks like we could all use a little bit of help with some basic communication, some basic sit down, stay stuff, right? Be ready to pivot, have the skill level, have the depth of knowledge to be able to pivot, know where you can pivot to. Right, you show up to a puppy class, you get a bunch of adult dogs, jumpy mouthy adult dogs show up, you're like, this is way outside my scope. Great. Do what you can in that moment. Recognize, like, hey, this is outside my scope. I'm going to refer you over to this trainer in my area that is great at working with this kind of stuff. I can't emphasize enough. That's why it's on its own slide, all nice and big like this. If your classes are not fun and enjoyable, people will not come back to them. That is the bottom line. People will not come back to your classes if they didn't have any fun in them. I think a lot of trainers go and price their, not everybody that prices their training classes as like a group. Not everybody, not all of them do this, but I think some price their classes as a big expensive group, and it basically guarantees that person won't back out. For me, I've always done drop-in classes, and my goal in that class is to get you to show up to the next one. It's not guaranteed you're going to come next week. And there's plenty of people that dropped out. They're like, I actually don't want to do any of this. Like, this is not the speed I kind of thought that I was going to show up and you're going to train my dog for me. Fine and fair. I'm not the trainer for everybody. I don't have to be everybody's trainer. That's why I'm doing things like this. I want there to be lots of trainers with lots of personalities doing this work and kind of specializing in different things, as I've said before. But overall, regardless of what your specialty is, your classes need to be fun and enjoyable. Your class should be, even if it's a very serious class, let's say you're doing some very serious work, you're doing Schutzhund, you're doing some sort of protection sport, you're doing, well, I already said protection sports, that whole blanket of things, right? That class needs to be pretty serious, but it needs to be enjoyable. It probably needs to be serious. It needs to be enjoyable for the people that come to your classes. I've done group dog reactivity classes. So dogs that bark, lunge, growl at other dogs on leash. Done group classes like that. They end up being really fun. And my favorite thing to walk around yelling is like, this was supposed to be a aggressive dog class. Where are all my aggressive dogs? Because they're all standing around having a great time. Your class should be enjoyable. And if they're not, people won't come back. That's the bottom line. All right, let's talk about private classes. That's group classes. Let's talk about private classes just briefly. Again, safety is your number one priority here. And consider that once we move into a private space, that person might be coming to a private lesson because it's not safe for them to attend a group class. So consider what tools you have available. Do we have physical barriers? Do we have muzzles? Do we have potentially like bite sleeves or something, which is potentially going to aggravate the problem? But do we have fences? Do we have secure equipment on the dog? Right? Are we not on a flat collar? Don't have a flat collar with a single D-ring protecting you from the dog that's growling, lunging, barking at you. That D-ring can pop open. That weld can be weaker than you think it is. That buckle can pop. The stitches can pop on the collar. Anything can happen. Let's have a secure piece of equipment on there, especially something like a harness that's got multiple points of contact. Can be great. Throughout the whole interaction, I want to maintain awareness of the dog and the handler. Throughout that interaction, I want to be watching. Is the handler watching the dog? I'm watching the dog at all times. I'm always aware of where that dog is. I don't want that dog to end up behind me, have me lean back in my chair, and the dog's like, look, this person's coming for me. Maintain awareness of the dog and the handler. Consider the environment that you're in. Are you in a sit-down office or are you out in public? Are you in that person's home? Are you in your home? Right? Consider the environment and consider how that's going to affect the dog's behavior. Remember that humane hierarchy. The first thing, most of your cases are going to be changing the environment. Well, bringing that dog into a space that's not where I usually see this behavior, that's changing the environment. I've had so many cases that come into my office for a private consult, back at the shelter especially, come into the shelter. The dog is like totally fine. Person comes in, they're like, I don't know, my dog is super aggressive at home and I guess he's fine here. I'm like, yeah, this is a different context. I believe you. I believe that this dog is doing this at home 100%. The dog's probably not going to do it here. That's great. We can work on some skill building here and then you can take it home and practice it at home where it does happen. But watch that environment. That's going to affect how the dog behaves. It's going to completely change how the dog behaves in one context to another. Referenced this before, but I cannot possibly say this enough. If the plan doesn't work for this client and this dog, they're not going to do it. The reason, if you have low owner compliance, the reason is probably because your training plans aren't working for this. They're not customized for this client and this dog. If you have blanket training plans, you can print something out real quick that gives you a step-by-step on how to do it. You're probably not customizing your training plans quite enough. There are plenty of situations like there's plenty of printouts that I can give people that will get them a great start, or maybe I have like 5 different printouts that are kind of, I can mix and match them to come up with my full training plan. Totally fair and fine. But if your crate training plan is always a one-pager, we're probably not considering some outliers in that case. There are plenty of dogs that are going to need more structure in that, or plenty of clients that are going to need more structure in that, or slightly different, like a modified plan there. So handouts are fantastic. I love them. Please have them available for your clients, but recognize that we might have to make some modifications. We should be making modifications for every person that's in front of me. So it's not my way or the highway. I talk to a lot of trainers like this, like, well, you can either do it how I tell you to do it, or you can find another trainer. They're going to find another trainer. And you're going to be the trainer with no business. And then you're going to be the trainer that's complaining on Facebook that you have no business. Your training plan's got to work for that client, that dog. And it's not your way. And if you say it's your way or the highway, they're going to choose the highway. Ultimately, bad business is bad for the dogs in your community. I want to remind you of this. As you're working with dogs and people in your community, the more people that turn away from you as someone who's hopefully a qualified professional, hopefully by the time you're doing, especially private clients, you've got some credentials behind your name, but you stop being able to help the dogs in your community, people will look elsewhere. And they might look at unreliable resources. They might be out there looking at, whatever trainer they can find on YouTube that might have absolutely no credibility, but has access to some dogs and makes some really compelling videos. And then that dog ends up in a shelter a couple months later. Right? That trainer has no idea. And I also want to keep you mindful of that as well. You as the trainer, stay mindful of some of your clients, especially if you've got this really kind of obstinate approach, or you're not doing a ton of follow-up with your clients, or you're doing some level of follow-up, but it's kind of hit or miss. I guarantee that some of your clients have rehomed the dogs after you've worked with them. I've had dogs rehomed after I've worked with them. My background's in animal sheltering. Usually people came to me when they're at the end of the road anyway. They're like, I really want to surrender my dog. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know. Like, I've reached out to all these trainers. Great. I'm happy to offer assistance. They're like, great, let's try it. Actually, it turns out that I can't do a dog in my life. Like this, I didn't realize, basically the person's like, I thought that I was getting a goldfish, and it turns out that I wasn't getting a goldfish. Totally fair and fine. Keep that in mind. Please keep in mind that as much as you might feel like a really successful trainer, like none of my clients have ever rehomed their dogs, you're gonna have some missteps. It's gonna happen. It's okay. But just stay humble in that. Also, when I'm developing a training plan with a client, this dog lives with them, not with you. This dog does not have to exist in the world that you have created. They have to exist in the owner's world. They got to exist with that handler in that person's house, their day-to-day life, not yours. And your job as a dog trainer is not to make them modify their life to match yours. Because your life might not be in line with what they want out of their life. And it's wild to think that I should be forcing the person to do what I'm like, well, you need to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and take your dog for a walk for an hour, and then go home and make them a bunch of Kongs, and then feed them the Kongs, and then put them in the crate, and then go to work, and then come home and then make more Kongs and go for another walk. And that is a lot. And I get that there are plenty of people that are into that, but there's plenty of people that are also not into that. And if that's what you're recommending to all your clients, you're going to lose some clients. Hard reality. So be reasonable about what you expect of people. They're allowed to have a different lifestyle than you. We want to set those SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. If you're not familiar with SMART, look it up. Lots of resources, mostly like business resources, but apply those same things to dog training. I've had a lot of success with it. Consider the consequences. People are going to not follow your plan. It's going to happen. I don't care how much you've customized that plan exactly for that person. Life happens. Sometimes things come up. I've got a great idea to do this. I'm going to do this next week. And then suddenly I've got a family member that passes away this week. Whole thing's blown up. Right? Failure to follow plans happens. Consider, what are the consequences of that? If the consequences of that are that somebody is in an unsafe situation, we need to rethink that training plan. If you're working a fear case, if you're working a barking, lunging, growling case, If you're working something like that and you're saying, hey, if you don't do all of these things, somebody will get hurt, you better rethink that. Rethink that training plan, right? Other side of that is you're like, hey, I want you to practice 15 minutes every day. Person's like, great, I can do that. A week later, you see them, they're like, I got 5 minutes one day last week. Things happened. Okay, so thank you for being honest with me. Thank you for letting me know. Is 5 minutes a week what we've got? Let's work within that. Let's work with wherever we're at. Wherever we're at, whatever we've got, let's work within that. And again, we want to make sure that these goals are relevant for this handler and this team, not you and your life. This dog does not live with you. This dog lives with them. Now you're ready to lead public group training classes just based on this stuff. Obviously not. Let's look, though, at creating some scripts for your training classes. At this point, if you've watched all these lectures, you should feel like maybe I can lead some group training classes. Maybe I can do something little for my community. Please, that little thing, that leading group training classes for your community, low cost, free, whatever, is not a little thing. That's a huge thing. It's an amazing thing. I'm so excited for you. I'm going to link to these in the description of this video. You are welcome to steal these, use them. Just please credit that you got them from me. These are very, very outdated at this point. These are from like my first group classes that I ever ran. So I use these as my demos to show you that you can keep it really simple. It's the first ones that I ever put together. So this is a basic obedience curriculum. We want to identify what's important to know and do, what's worth being familiar with, and what's the essential question that we're answering. Keep these really, really broad. That's how you're going to have the most fun with these classes. Keep them really broad. For example, this one is, why doesn't my dog listen to me? Well, your dog doesn't listen to you because you've been unclear in your communication or you haven't provided sufficient motivation to do it. That's all we're trying to answer in this basic obedience class. And anytime that I got to pivot a little bit, think back to that initial question. It's kind of like establishing a mission statement of the class. That's what we're going to go back to. Here's a suggested outline of class. We've got the time that we're expected to spend on it. This time is always inaccurate. We always end up spending a little bit more, a little bit less. I always end up talking way too fast through parts that I'm supposed to talk slowly through. And then I end up lingering too long on activities. So I like to keep a nice balance because I know myself. What is the activity? What are the details? And why are we doing it? I strongly encourage you, when you're laying out kind of how you're going to break down your classes and when you're looking over these, look at that purpose. Why am I doing this? What do I want the person to get out of this? Because that way, when somebody's like, hey, I'm not quite getting this, or like if I'm doing a sit activity, teach the dog to sit. Well, you got a greyhound and a Great Dane that showed up, and neither one of them is really comfortable sitting. Am I going to force them to sit? No, I can do a down instead, or I can do a stand. I can do a stand in position. Or I can do, I don't know, a chin rest on something. Like if the purpose is just stay stationary, let's do a place, right? Know why you're doing each of these activities so that you can explain to people why you're doing it and why, if we need to modify it, we're still on kind of purpose there. I've also got some examples of basic obedience games down at the end here. These are super, super simple ones. I encourage you to look out in the world. There are plenty of resources, people that talk about basic obedience games or training games that have worked in their group classes. There's lots of fun stuff depending on what you want to do. Here's one about the leash, and here's one about confidence building. The essential question that we're trying to answer is how do I help my dog not be so scared? We have a greeting routine that's outlined in here. I do not encourage you to start with confidence building unless you've got a strong background in dog behavior. You are very comfortable reading dog body language, very subtle dog body language. This is not your starting point. Starting point, start with something like basic obedience. Basic obedience, if we're using reward-based training, is real hard to mess up. Giving rewards to things that I like, finding and discovering what rewards people want to use and the dog wants to use. Really, really fun class. What we learned during our free group training classes that our students offered after just 6 weeks of lecture, they started offering public group training classes, and some of them had never led a group training class before. What we found out is that the more kind of broad your category for your class is, the more people will show up to it. Real vague titles of classes got lots of people interested, like, what is that? We had this fascinating class that was all about like emotional regulation with your dog, or not really emotional regulation. It was like syncing up with your dog and like using meditation techniques because this student has a background in meditation and can explain that to other people, obviously better than I can because I do not good at meditating. So involve pieces of that. So involve these things that you find fun, you find interesting, involve those pieces in what you're doing, and have some fun with these classes. People will want to come to things that are fun and make them want to come back next time. After watching these, you should want to talk about this. And if you don't have a network of dog trainers around you that have a strong foundation in dog behavior and dog training and learning theory and basic biology, if you don't have that community, let's build that community. That's exactly what Animal Welfare United wants to do, is build that community of people that you can talk to in a classroom-like setting. Right now, we're doing that with Discord. You can reach out to me and just kind of look at the Discord. You don't have to participate in it. You can just observe what's happening in there by just reaching out to me, or you can sign up on Coffee for a supporter, for one of the supporter levels, and that'll give you various levels of access to different channels in Discord. We've got programs that are all the way up to like one-on-ones with me once a month to talk about your cases, to like weekly or not weekly, monthly graded assignments where I'll literally review what you're doing, give you some feedback on what the assignment is. Gonna do, again, like fun stuff to do with your dogs or to do with your clients. Keep it fun, keep it loose, but help you improve your skills as a trainer. Really want to create that community. Follow along on various social media. YouTube, Instagram are the big ones at the moment. Follow along. I'm trying to release more educational material, more free or at least accessible stuff. And thank you so much for doing the work that you do. It's one of my favorite things to say. It's how I sign up a lot of my emails. Thank you so much for doing the work that you're doing. Just you watching, just you being interested in learning about dog behavior and dog training is so amazing. I'm so happy that you're here and doing this. I'm so happy that you're considering doing something like this. It's such a rewarding career path. I've been doing it for the last 15 years and I couldn't get out of it even if I wanted to. Thank you so much for being a part of this community, and I can't wait to talk to you in person.